Okay, so we're going to review EE 1 through 4. I'm going to give the answers first, and then we'll go back through and work out any problems, and you can see the explanations of any that you missed. On EE 1, number 2 is negative 1.8x minus 6xy. Oops. Number 5 is 5/7 x plus 2. Number 9 is the first, second, and last choice. 13 is C and D, the third and fourth choices. Moving on to EE2, number 2 is D. Number 3 is the first and fourth choices. Number 6 is A. Number 9, the first one is 1.20x. The second is 0.20x. The third one is 0.80x, and the last is 20 minus x. Number 10, part A is choice C, and part B is 5.2 pounds per month. EE3, number 3 is A. Number 7 is $7.25. Number 10 is C. Number 12 is 6 rolls. EE4A, number 2 is $41.75. The equation would be 251 equal 4x plus 84. Number 3 is B. Number 8 is 8 5/8 feet. And you could, so that's 8.625 feet. Number 10 is 24.5 feet. EE4B, number 2 is C. 3 is M is greater than 5.7. Number 8, M is less than or equal to -5. And 13 is A. Now we're going to go back through and go over any questions you might have missed. Number 2 on EE1, we just do the distributive property. X times -1.8 is -1.8x. X times -6y is -6xy. Number 5, normally we do distributive property first, but there's really nothing to distribute because we're distributing a +1, so nothing changes. So I'm just going to bring over my terms. And now I have my x terms. 2/7 plus 3/7 x is 5/7 x. Those are like terms because they just have x. And then my constants, they're like terms. -6 plus 8 is +2. Number 9, we'll just go through and simplify each answer choice. The first one, distributive property, gives us 18a minus 12, which matches this. Choice B gives us 18a minus 12 once again. C gives us -18a. At that point, it's a different sign for the a term, so it's not correct. This next one gives us 18a plus 12, different sign for our constant, so that doesn't work. And our last one, we get -12 plus 18a. And remember, we can change the order of terms. This is still 18a minus 12. We just kept the signs with it. Number 13, we're just finding equivalent expressions. The first one doesn't work because it's an opposite sign for the 1/2. The second one doesn't work because the signs are not right. The next one, they're both negatives, so that one does work. Choice D, we can simplify this. We know we have -3/5 z. Sorry, that's z and not x. When we add a negative, that's just like saying positive times negative is a -1/2. So this one works. And then the last choice should have had a negative in front of 1/2, but didn't. Okay, moving on to EE2. Number 2, members of a store's reward program earn 10% of their purchases in points. Which expression represents the points earned on a purchase of $P? Well, it's not adding or subtracting anything. It's just saying they earn 10% of the purchase. So if we say 10% of P, that's 0.10 of means times P. Number 3. The cost of renting a car is $26.50 plus $10 per day. Sales tax is 6%. Select all expressions that represent the cost of renting a car for D days. Well, the sales tax is added to all the cost. So we look and we say, okay, that $26.50 occurs one time plus $10 per day. And we could use any variable. We'll use D since that's what they're using here. And thinking for a minute, if sales tax is 6%, that's like taking 100% of something and adding 6% to it to give us 106% of that. So 106% is 1.06 of that, so 1.06 times $26.50 plus 10D. So that is answer choice A. Answer choice D just went through and distributed this, where we would get 28.09 by distributing plus 10.6D. We're done with that. Number 6. Marco's parents want to encourage him to save money during the 8 weeks of summer. They agreed to add 15% to the balance of his savings account. If Marco saves X dollars a week, which expression is what he has at the end of the term? Well, he's earning X dollars a week for 8 weeks. So he's earning 8 times X amount of money for the 8 weeks. Then they're going to add 15% to the balance. So he had 100% of something, and we add 15%. That gives us 115%, which is 1.15. So I could multiply this by 1.15 to get answer choice A. Number 9 is just matching expressions in algebraic form and word form. When X is increased by 20%, that means we had 100% of X, and we added 20% of X. That gives 120% of X, which is just 1.20X in decimal form. 20% of X is just saying 0.20 in decimal form times X. X decreased by 20% is like saying 100% of X minus 20% of X, which is 80% of X, which does come out to the decimal 0.0X. And then 20 decreased by X, that's a little different. That's not even got a percent. You're saying 20 minus X. Number 10, the office decreases paper waste by 35%. Originally, the office produces W pounds of waste. Which expression represents the waste reduction? It's not saying the total after. It's just saying what reduced. It reduced 35%. So 35% of W does come out to 0.35 W. How much paper waste do they produce now if they originally produced 8 pounds per month? Well, we could do this a couple different ways. One is we could actually see what percent of waste they now produce. So we could say, okay, 100% of the waste minus 35% of the waste is 65% of the waste. And that is 0.65 times the waste, the amount that they originally produced, which was 8. When we multiply that out, we do get 5.2. Moving on to EE3. Troy spends $9.75 on chicken feed each week. He has 48 chickens, and each chicken lays 1 egg a day. At the end of the week, Troy keeps 1 dozen eggs for himself and sells the rest at the farmer's market for $4 a dozen. What is Troy's weekly profit? Okay, so thinking through this problem, he has 48 chickens. They each lay an egg a day. So we have 48 chickens. At the end of a week, he keeps a dozen for himself. So let's think of what he'd make in a week. If there's 48 per day, then he's getting 7 times 48 eggs for the week. And we could just go ahead and work through this and say, well, that is 336 eggs that he brings in every week. Now it says he keeps 1 dozen and sells the rest for $4 a dozen. Okay, well, 336 eggs, if we take 336 and divide by 12, because there's 12 in a dozen, we get 28 dozen eggs. But he's going to keep 1, so he sells 27, and that is at $4 a dozen. Oops. So that's $108. Now we have another thing though. He spent $9.75. So if we take that $108 and subtract what he spent, $9.75, we get the amount of money he made, his profit, $98.25. Number 6. Jeremiah buys 3 pounds of cheese at $3.50 per pound. He also buys 5 pounds of sliced turkey. If he spends $46.75 in total for the cheese and turkey, what is the price per pound of sliced turkey? Well, let's set up and find what we know. We know he buys 3 pounds of cheese at $3.50 a pound. He buys 5 pounds of turkey, we don't know how much per pound, and he spends $46.75 total. So I would just start here by saying 3 pounds times $3.50 plus 5 pounds times an unknown price equals $46.75. So this is 10.5 plus 5x equal 46.75. We're just solving a 2-step equation. And what happens here is we're actually subtracting the price of cheese, $10.50, to find the price of turkey is $36.25. That was for 5 pounds. So when we divide by 5, we get the price for each pound is $7.25. Number 10, Mila spends $71.05 at the craft store. She buys 5 yards of fabric at $12.85 per yard and 2 spools of thread. What's the price of 1 spool of thread? Well, we know the fabric is 5 yards times $12.85 per yard. We know there's 2 spools of thread, but we don't know how much each costs, so let's just call it T. But we do know the total is $71.05. So we'll just simplify this. We get $64.25 for the fabric. And now we're going to solve a 2-step equation. We're going to subtract the cost of fabric to find what the cost of 2 spools of thread are. And we get that the 2 spools of thread are $6.80. So let's divide by 2 to find the cost of 1 spool of thread, which is $3.40. Number 12. Shane covered a 10-foot by 14-foot wall with his wallpaper. To match the pattern, he bought 20% extra. Each roll of paper cost 30 square feet. How many rolls of wallpaper did Shane buy? Okay, so first of all, let's find out how much the wall is. So we can just find the area of the wall, length times width, which is 10 by 14. So that wall has 140 square foot. But he bought 20% extra. So that means we're going to take that 20% extra and say, well, that's 100% plus 20%. So 120% of 140, 1.2 times 140 gives us 168 square feet. Each roll covers 30 square feet. So 168 divided by 30 gives us 5.6. Can you buy 5.6 rolls of wallpaper? No, we have to go up to 6 rolls. E4A, number 2. A service station charges $251 for 4 new tires and installation. If the installation portion of the bill is $84, what is the price of 1 tire? Write and solve an equation. Okay, so we know that we're looking for the price of 1 tire. 4 tires plus installation, which is $84, equals $251. So we can go through and solve this for T, the price of 1 tire, by subtracting the installation cost from both sides. And we get that 4 tires is equal to $167. Divide both sides by 4, and 1 tire is $41.75. Problem 3, solve this equation to find x. So I would probably rewrite it where I have a little space. 8.35x minus 1.5 equals 71.98. I'm going to box in my x term because this is a 2-step equation. I'm going to get rid of subtracting 1.5 by adding 1.5 to both sides. And we get 8.35x is equal to 73.48. Divide both sides by 8.35. And we get that x is 8.8. Problem number 8. A square with sides x feet long has a perimeter of 34.5 feet. How long are the sides? Well, we know that the perimeter of a square has 4 equal sides. So if we think, okay, 4 times each side, 4 sides total is 34.5. That's the same thing, by the way, as saying 34.5. We could change the decimals here. Divide both sides by 4. We get x is 8.625, which is 8 5/8. Number 10. The perimeter of a rectangle is 87 feet. The length is x and the width is 19 feet. What's the length in feet? Write and solve an equation. Well, we know perimeter is adding all the sides, and we're specifically talking about the perimeter of a rectangle. We know it's twice the length plus twice the width. We know the perimeter is 87. We don't know the length. We do know the width is 19. So I've set up an equation. I'm going to solve it for x. So I'm going to simplify. Now I'm going to subtract 38 from both sides. And I get that 49 is twice the length. So let's divide both sides by 2 to get what the length is. And we get that the length is 24.5. On to the last standard, EE4B. These deal with inequalities. Number 2, an animal shelter relies on donations and adoption fees of 75 cents per pet to pay its monthly expenses of $2,800. 1 month, 12 pets are adopted. Which inequality describes the donations X required for the shelter? So we know there's 12 pets adopted at $75 per pet. So 12 times $75 per pet plus X, however many donations there are needed for $2,800. That's got to be greater than, or it could be equal to $2,800. And that is answer choice C. I'm going to solve this inequality on number 3. I'm going to box in my m term. This works like an equation. And subtract 14.3 from both sides. We find that negative 6.5m is less than negative 37.05. Now we're going to divide both sides by negative 6.5. When we divide by a negative on both sides, we're going to flip our inequality symbol. We get a positive 5.7. Number 8. I'm going to solve this inequality and graph its solution. I'm going to move over a little here. We've got m plus 8 is less than or equal to 3. I want m by itself, so I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. M, we get negative 5. And all we did was subtract. If we add or subtract, nothing changes on our inequality symbol. The only time it changes is if we multiply or divide both sides by a negative. And of course, to graph this, we have negative 5, has a line, take our time, shade it in. And since our variable is on the left, then our arrow points the correct direction. Our last problem, number 13. Marco saved $279 for karate lessons. He bought a uniform for $56 and pays $14 per class. Which inequality represents the number of classes C Marco can take and stay within his budget? Okay, well, he saved $279, so that's his budget. He buys a uniform that is $56. He adds $14 times each class, and this has got to be less than or equal to 279. To rearrange this is the same as saying 279 is greater than or equal to the cost of his classes, which we had 14C plus 56, so that matches answer choice A.